As if from the very moment an individual senses a calling toward a higher purpose, there is a stirring within the soul that sets them apart from the crowd. This sense of being chosen is not about ego or superiority. Rather, it is about a deep, seated awareness that a unique mission has been etched into one's spirit. Throughout history, many have described the feeling of being singled out by a divine hand, entrusted with insight or tasks that transcend ordinary concerns. Yet, along with this sense of sacred responsibility comes a weight that can feel overwhelming. The struggle to maintain spiritual energy, keep moral integrity intact, and remain open to the subtle guidance that flows from a higher source can be monumental. At times, even the most devout find themselves inexplicably exhausted, as though drained by forces they cannot quite name. This invisible depletion often emanates from the misuse or misdirection of core energies that were intended for the fulfillment of a holy plan. Among these powerful energies, the one linked most intimately to creation, vitality, and profound spiritual connection is the one related to sexuality. Many religious traditions, including biblical teachings, emphasize the sacredness of sexual energy, viewing it as more than mere physical desire. Rather, it is frequently portrayed as a spiritual conduit, a force that can unify two souls, bring forth new life, and deepen one's relationship with the divine. However, like any potent force, it can be corrupted, squandered, or distorted in ways that cause profound harm to both the individual and the broader collective. When sacred texts warn against certain acts, they are not merely issuing moral edicts devoid of deeper meaning. Instead, they highlight hidden realities of energetic exchanges that can either elevate the spirit or ensnare it. The individual who is chosen to carry a mantle of spiritual leadership or to manifest healing in this world can find themselves particularly vulnerable. This is because their energetic field is more sensitive, more finely tuned, and more readily impacted by moral and spiritual violations. Activities that might seem minor or purely physical can carry ramifications that ripple into the subtle layers of one's being, blocking channels of divine insight and siphoning away vitality. Many believe that when sexual energy is honored within the framework of divine intention, it can nourish creativity, courage, empathy, and a deeper connection to the sacred. Conversely, when it is misused, whether through betrayals of trust, exploitations of oneself or others, or actions outside the boundaries that sacred texts delineate, the consequences can be devastating. Guilt, shame, and spiritual confusion often follow such choices, leading to a sense of separation from the very source of strength and guidance. Over time, this separation can intensify, leaving an individual feeling distant from their God-given calling and unsure how to reclaim lost vigor. In order to illuminate these challenges, it becomes essential to examine specific behaviors that erode spiritual vitality. By understanding how each transgression affects the mind, body, and soul, one can start to see the intricate web that links morality, psychology, and spiritual potency. Among the most frequently cited violations in sacred scripture is the betrayal of a sacred bond that occurs when a union, meant to reflect divine fidelity, is broken. Some describe it as a kind of heart wound that not only shatters trust in a relationship but also disrupts the invisible threads tying a person to their higher calling. When someone steps outside the commitment they have made, especially in a covenant that is meant to mirror faithfulness to the divine, a spiritual fracture ensues. The energy that was once focused on growth, unity, and the flourishing of the household is diverted into a path of secrecy, guilt, and spiritual discord. This is one reason why so many traditions place immense emphasis on preserving the sanctity of a pledged union. However, there is another dimension to these transgressions that is often overlooked. It is not merely about violating one's vows, it is also about inviting disorder into the intimate realm where the human spirit is most vulnerable. Individuals who perceive themselves as chosen or who recognize a special task laid upon their shoulders frequently experience a heightened sensitivity to moral and spiritual disruptions. An act that might seem purely physical can leave a deep imprint on the psyche, creating lingering emotional scars and energetic imbalances. These imbalances can manifest as obstacles in prayer, confusion about one's direction, or a sense that the divine connection has somehow grown faint. When the bond of trust is broken, it undermines one's confidence in divine promises as well. After all, if one cannot keep their own word, it becomes harder to stand securely on the promises one believes God has spoken. Self-doubt creeps in. How can I be worthy of carrying out this higher mission if I've compromised integrity in such a profound way? This internal dialogue saps confidence, drains focus, and creates a chasm between aspiration and action. The energy once devoted to building a life of service and devotion now dissipates into wrestling with regret, attempting to hide the truth, or dealing with complicated emotional fallout. Yet in these teachings, there is also a door toward redemption. The power of genuinely turning away from destructive actions and seeking divine forgiveness is emphasized repeatedly. Even so, the residual effects of betrayal do not vanish instantaneously. Spiritual energy can be restored, but it often requires intentional action, sincere repentance, efforts to rebuild trust, and the humble acceptance of whatever consequences come as a result of one's past decisions. By facing these consequences courageously, an individual can begin the process of mending the rift that drains their strength. This process, though rigorous, serves as a refining fire. For those who embrace it with sincerity, it can become a catalyst for deeper spiritual maturity. The realization that a sacred bond was broken can birth a heightened sense of compassion, a renewed appreciation for the sanctity of vows, and a more fervent commitment to living in alignment with divine principles. Another pattern that diminishes spiritual energy is the decision to share one's body outside a framework of genuine, covenantal commitment. While casual indulgences may seem culturally acceptable or even encouraged, such actions can bring about a fragmentation of one's inner world. There is a tangible yet subtle exchange of energy when people unite physically. In a sacred union, this exchange can be elevating, designed to deepen love and foster divine creativity, but when the union is formed in fleeting or purposeless contexts, it can weaken essential connections to higher guidance. For individuals who are sensitive to spiritual currents, this weakening might appear as a haze that clouds discernment. Making important life choices becomes more confusing, as though intuition loses its clarity. The sense of divine companionship, once experienced in moments of meditation or prayer, may feel faint. Over time, these repetitive patterns of shallow physical encounters lead to the accumulation of emotional and spiritual debris that can obstruct the flow of inspiration. The heart, once receptive to whispers of grace, may become caroused by regret, envy, or simple exhaustion. In addition, there is the concept of tying one's spirit to others who might not share the same divine trajectory. When people engage intimately without considering the depths of another's soul, they inadvertently link their energies. This phenomenon has often been referred to as creating soul ties. These ties can persist long after the physical encounter has ended. If the tie is formed with someone carrying heavy emotional baggage, unresolved trauma, or negativity, those burdens can transfer and linger. The resulting entanglement can anchor an individual in spiritual stagnation, compromising the ability to ascend toward the fullness of their calling. Nevertheless, there is hope for those seeking liberation from these entanglements. Honest self-reflection is the starting point, acknowledging the ways in which casual involvements or physically driven connections have diminished focus and joy. The next step involves genuine releases, prayerfully cutting the unhealthy ties, seeking forgiveness, and perhaps engaging in a period of solitude to recalibrate one's energies. During this time, introspection can reveal what led to these actions in the first place, whether loneliness, societal pressure, or a misunderstanding of one's worth. Recognizing one's intrinsic value as someone entrusted with a divine assignment can spark a newfound resolve to safeguard inner wholeness. Overcoming these patterns requires learning to channel sexual energy into purposeful endeavors. Instead of viewing it merely as a source of pleasure, one can embrace it as a wellspring of life force meant to enliven creativity, cultivate sacred relationships, and deepen faith. Through deliberate choices, establishing boundaries, cultivating self-awareness, and pouring energies into meaningful projects, a person can reorient themselves towards spiritual vitality. The transformative path involves not merely avoiding harmful behavior, but actively nurturing the divine potential that arises when sexuality is honored for its higher purpose. A constant threat to spiritual vitality emerges when the mind becomes ensnared by persistent fantasies or fixations that revolve around physical desire detached from genuine love or moral grounding. This is often described as a quiet invasion that takes hold of the imagination, diverting focus away from divine and anchoring it in fleeting urges. While some might dismiss such internal battles as harmless, scriptural wisdom repeatedly underscores that any corruption of thought can become a seed for destructive actions. If left unchecked, this inner erosion of discipline can pave the way to more overt behaviors that tear at the fabric of one's moral and spiritual integrity. In certain teachings, it is noted that even the act ducking upon another person with an exploitative gaze can be as consequential as committing a transgression physically. This highlights the immense power of the mind in shaping reality. When mental energy is funneled into obsessive craving, the heart's inclination can shift from service and devotion to self-centered gratification. This shift, in turn, drains the radiance that once made the individual attuned to divine whispers. The subtle enjoyment of these fantasies might create a temporary thrill, but they ultimately sow restlessness, dissatisfaction, and an aching sense of separation from one's sacred path. For those who are acutely aware of their calling, such mental habits can become a stumbling block that prevents them from walking confidently in their purpose. Moments set aside for prayer or meditation may be disrupted by distracting visions. A sense of guilt may permeate the conscience, casting shadows over an otherwise bright spirit. While guilt can act as a catalyst for positive change, too much of it without resolution can lead to self-condemnation and further distance the individual from the nurturing presence of the divine. Breaking this cycle involves more than merely repressing thoughts. True transformation occurs when one consciously redirects mental energy toward healthier and more uplifting pursuits. This could involve immersing oneself in spiritually enriching literature, engaging in acts of compassion, or spending reflective time in nature. Cultivating a renewed admiration for the inherent dignity of every person can also shift perspective, replacing objectification with respect. Some find assistance in practices that train the mind, such as contemplative prayer or mindfulness exercises, helping to curb the relentless flow of intrusive images. Awareness plays a pivotal role here. Recognizing that every moment of mental wandering contributes to the trajectory of one's life can inspire deliberate choices about where to focus attention. Rather than dwelling on the regret having harbored lustful imaginings, one can use that realization as motivation to reinforce boundaries, deepen spiritual practices, and reach out for accountability if needed. Over time, this intentional approach not only frees the mind from the grip of incessant longing, but also rekindles the luminous connection to one's divine assignment. By keeping the mind's eye fixed on worthy ideals, the chosen individual fortifies their spiritual reserves and becomes more resilient against the draining pull of aimless cravings. Some believers grapple with feelings that move beyond conventional notions, finding themselves attracted to paths that Scripture designates as outside the intended design of human relationships. This area of human experience can be highly sensitive as it involves profound questions about identity, orientation, and personal freedom. Yet, within many religious perspectives, there is a distinction between recognizing someone's inherent value as a soul cherished by the divine and addressing the spiritual ramifications of acting against what is taught to be sacred order. Balancing this tension can be challenging, especially in a world where diverse expressions of love are increasingly embraced, while certain scriptural injunctions remain steadfast in cautioning that deviation from sacred patterns can lead to spiritual imbalance. For those bearing a heightened sense of calling, the internal conflict may be even more intense. On one hand, there is a desire to live authentically and honor personal truth. On the other hand, there is a reverence for the guidelines believed to be handed down through holy texts. Confusion, fear, and anguish can accompany these struggles, draining the individual's sense of closeness to the divine. In some cases, people may distance themselves from prayer or from congregational life, feeling that they no longer belong or cannot reconcile their inclinations with their sense of divine duty. It is crucial, however, to recognize that within these teachings, condemnation of an action does not equate to hatred of a person. There is an acknowledgement that every individual is made in the image of the divine, endowed with gifts and dignity. The question that arises is whether one's behavior aligns with the spiritual laws that safeguard wholeness, purity, and purposeful living. From this viewpoint, stepping outside the boundaries believed to be laid out by sacred order can disrupt an individual's inner harmony and sever them from the powerful life force that is meant to empower their unique mission. Overcoming these feelings or learning how to channel them responsibly is a deeply personal journey. It may involve counseling, prayer, honest conversations with mentors, and periods of heartfelt introspection. Some will seek a path of celibacy, focusing on service, contemplation, and acts of love toward others without engaging in relationships they believe conflict with divine teaching. Others may find they are called to a different path of transformation or support. Regardless, the essential point is that when spiritual energy is at stake, every choice about intimate behavior resonates far beyond the momentary gratification of desire. Ultimately, there is encouragement in remembering that the divine is seen as merciful and compassionate in many faith traditions. Sincere efforts to live in alignment with holy principles, combined with honest grappling with the complexities of identity and desire, can lead to renewed clarity, peace, and closeness with the Creator. For the person who has felt a sacred calling from a young age, the realization that certain struggles do not disqualify them can bring immense relief. Indeed, the refining process can become a testament to the resilience and depth of one's devotion, as well as a springboard for ministering to others who grapple with similar questions. Beyond interpersonal attractions, there exist more generalized acts that undermine the sacredness of physical union. While they may appear harmless or even normalize in modern culture, such behaviors can corrode the core of one's spiritual vitality. For some, this might involve habitual consumption of explicit images or videos, an activity that over time reshapes the way one perceives intimacy and connection. When sexual content is stripped of reverence and presented as a commodity, it warps the viewer's capacity to appreciate the true purpose behind the gift of human sexuality. Instead of fostering deeper bonds of love and mutual respect, it primes the mind for fleeting arousal and endless novelty-seeking. For an individual who perceives themselves as chosen, the reliance on such stimuli can dull the finely tuned spiritual senses needed to hear divine guidance. It is like static interfering with an otherwise clear radio signal. Prayers may feel less potent, meditative practices become harder to maintain, and a subtle shame may linger in the background of everyday life. This shame, even if not consciously acknowledged, casts a shadow that can sap one's willingness to wholeheartedly serve or witness about divine truths. Perhaps most concerning is how this repeated indulgence can create addictive cycles where the pursuit of a next overshadows the soul's yearning for genuine connection and authenticity. A similarly destructive pattern emerges when individuals exploit others, whether financially or emotionally, in exchange for sexual favors. This behavior might appear in varied forms, some explicit, others more subtle. The underlying thread, however, is a reduction of sacred union to a transaction, stripping it of its capacity to reflect a mutual exchange of love and life-giving energy. At the spiritual level, this commodification fosters an environment of distrust, exploitation, and devaluation of the human body, which is revered as a temple in many religious traditions. Such actions create deep fissures in moral character, making it difficult to stand in the light of truth without feeling exposed by hypocrisy. The good news is that transformation is possible. Recognizing the pattern is the critical first step. An honest admission of how dependence on explicit materials or exploitative engagements has taken root allows the individual to confront the brokenness that lies beneath the habit. From there, deliberate steps can be taken to break free. Some people find that turning to trusted spiritual mentors or even professional counselors helps them face the underlying emotional triggers, such as loneliness, stress, or unresolved trauma, that drive them toward harmful behavior. Others might establish practical safeguards, like accountability software or structured routines that minimize idle time. Above all, restoring one's relationship with the divine becomes paramount. Acts of contrition, heartfelt prayer, and immersion in holy teachings can gradually dissolve the cloud of guilt and renew the person's sense of being cherished by a higher power. The process of recovery can be slow, demanding daily vigilance, but it stands as a powerful testament to the strength of one's calling. In grappling with these pervasive temptations, individuals emerge with a humility and compassion that can be channeled into helping others navigate similar struggles. There are, however, transgressions so grave that they strike at the very foundation of society and personal well-being. Among these are violations of trust within familial lines, acts that distort relationships meant to be governed by nurturing, protective bonds. When such boundaries are crossed, it represents not only a betrayal of personal trust, but also an affront to the sacred order that structures family life. Spiritual traditions emphasize how the family unit serves as a microcosm of divine principles: respect, growth, love, and mutual support. Violations within this sphere can unleash profound spiritual and psychological ramifications, creating wounds that ripple across generations. Chosen individuals, tasked with carrying light and wisdom to those around them, may find themselves bearing the weight of generational curses if such transgressions have stained their family lineage. The dysfunction doesn't always manifest in obvious ways. It can lurk behind cycles of abuse, secrecy, and patterns of unhealthy relationships. Recognizing and breaking free from these inherited burdens demands both courage and faith. It often involves shining a penetrating light on dark family secrets, challenging cultural taboos, and undertaking rigorous healing processes that may include therapy, pastoral counseling, or spiritual deliverance sessions. The trauma resulting from these violations can stifle a person's capacity to trust, thus undermining their ability to form healthy spiritual or interpersonal connections. Prayer becomes difficult because the sense of safety, critical to opening one's heart, is eroded. Likewise, stepping into positions of leadership or guidance may trigger internal fears of perpetuating harm or hypocrisy. Yet, for those called to a divine mission, these very struggles can become a crucible that forges deeper empathy and unwavering resolve to protect the vulnerable. On a broader societal level, failing to address these serious breaches erodes the moral structure that holds communities together. Families steeped in unspoken violations often produce individuals struggling with identity, self-worth, and emotional regulation. This in turn, can hamper the efforts of those who aspire to bring healing and unity, as they must first confront a legacy of spiritual dissonance. Chosen ones, in particular, can become catalysts for restoration by insisting on transparency, advocating for the healing of victims, and standing firmly for moral realignment, even when it is painful or unpopular. Ultimately, the journey toward mending these fractures requires an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. The spiritual dimension of these acts cannot be overlooked. Any violation that severs trust on such an intimate level has far-reaching consequences, both for the immediate people involved and for the generational lines that follow. In addressing these grievous transgressions, individuals reclaim the authority that was lost through deception and betrayal. They also pave the way for future generations to experience wholeness and freedom from the shadows that once loomed. Although the process may be lengthy, entailing confession, repentance, and possibly legal or societal accountability, it paves the way for genuine renewal. For chosen individuals, confronting these familial sins can be the key that unlocks their fullest spiritual potential, transforming pain into a fierce resolve to uplift and safeguard others. Another area of profound concern involves acts that violate not only human dignity, but the natural order established in creation. These transgressions, while relatively rare, possess a level of spiritual weight that can sever a person from the sense of divine connection more drastically than many others. They are often cited in sacred writings as abominations, serving as stark warnings of how deeply humans can stray when base desires overpower reason and reverence. In such behaviors, the boundary between sacred stewardship and corrupted dominance blurs, revealing the darkest aspects of human capacity. For someone called to bring forth light, compassion, or healing, engaging in such a violation can create a spiritual rift that feels nearly insurmountable. The guilt, revulsion, and sense of moral disintegration that follow can lead to severe despair and self-loathing. The individual may withdraw from community and spiritual fellowship, fearing judgment, and thus cut themselves off from the very support systems that could help guide them toward repentance and redemption. A chosen person might feel that their unique calling has been irrevocably forfeited by such an egregious act, which can spiral into hopelessness. Yet, even in these extremes, many religious teachings hold that no sin lies beyond the reach of divine grace, provided there is authentic contrition. The path to restoration is arduous, often involving rigorous accountability, public confession in certain circumstances, and a deep, life-altering transformation of one's moral and spiritual framework. The lesson gleaned from these harrowing accounts is that a calling or sense of election is no safeguard against the corruptibility of the human heart. Without vigilance and steadfast alignment to sacred principles, even the most gifted or devout individual can descend into destructive choices. Communities also bear a responsibility to address these forms of transgression with both gravity and compassion. Some might prefer to look away or deny that such acts could ever occur within their fellowship, but this only drives the wrongdoing further into secrecy, where it can fester and perpetuate harm. Instead, by fostering an environment that actively promotes healing, accountability, and rigorous moral education, a community can become a fortress against such evils. Chosen individuals, in particular, can take a stand by advocating for open dialogue, robust pastoral care, and policies that protect the vulnerable and uphold the reverence for all living creatures. The sobering reality is that, while these acts represent the extreme end of spiritual violations, they stand as a warning to any who grow complacent or presume that certain boundaries are unbreakable. They remind everyone that human nature, when left unchecked, can deviate shockingly from the divine ideal. Yet, at the same time, they also illuminate the depths of potential transformation. If someone, through genuine remorse and radical life change, can be brought back from even these dire circumstances, it testifies to the astonishing breadth of mercy and the resilience of a soul that humbly seeks forgiveness. Faced with these sobering realities, many who sense they have a divinely appointed destiny may wonder how to guard their essential life force and remain steadfast amid a culture that frequently glamorizes sexual indulgence. The first step often involves cultivating a heightened awareness of one's vulnerabilities and implementing safeguards against triggers. Recognizing the potential for missteps is not a sign of spiritual weakness. On the contrary, it demonstrates humility and wisdom. Even the most fervent believer may find themselves struggling in environments saturated by provocative imagery or casual moral standards. By proactively identifying the areas of susceptibility, one can formulate plans to counter them, perhaps by limiting exposure, seeking spiritual mentorship, or engaging in healthy community activities that provide wholesome camaraderie. Another crucial aspect of fortification is to nurture an active prayer life and immersion in sacred texts. Rather than relying solely on a rigid list of prohibitions, a chosen individual can root themselves in teachings that reveal the beauty, purpose, and sanctity of sexual energy. Meditating on passages that celebrate divine love, commitment, and moral purity can instill a sense of reverence that naturally counters temptations. This internalized reverence functions like a compass, guiding thoughts and desires toward constructive expressions rather than destructive ones. Still, spiritual vigilance does not imply living in a vacuum. Many find value in forging accountability relationships, where one regularly checks in with a trusted friend or mentor about personal struggles and victories. This mutual support reduces isolation, combats shame, and creates a sense of communal responsibility for moral integrity. In situations where secrecy has fueled destructive habits, simply bringing those shadows into the light of honest conversation can break their hold. It is also helpful to remember that the journey towards spiritual resilience is seldom linear. Missteps can happen, and when they do, the vital action is to recenter swiftly, turning to the divine for forgiveness and to supportive allies for encouragement. Dwelling in shame or using one setback as an excuse to abandon all progress only perpetuates the cycle of failure. Instead, each stumble can serve as a reminder of human fallibility and the inexhaustible compassion available to those who sincerely seek to align with higher principles. On a practical note, some benefit from structured routines that honor the body in uplifting ways. A physical exercise, adequate rest, and wholesome nutrition all contribute to a sense of well-being that diminishes the allure of detrimental behaviors. By caring for the physical vessel that houses the spirit, one makes a statement of devotion, acknowledging that life and vitality are gifts requiring stewardship. Over time, these habits build a foundation of stability, improving emotional balance and resilience in the face of temptation. Such a holistic approach underscores that spiritual life is not separated from daily existence but interwoven with each choice, discipline, and intention. An integral part of maintaining spiritual vitality involves recognizing the subtle interplay between the mind, emotions, and body. Sexual energy, while powerful and capable of being harnessed for divine purposes, can also become a channel for unresolved emotional needs or psychological wounds. Those who identify as chosen frequently carry empathetic or visionary gifts, which can leave them even more susceptible to emotional extremes. When loneliness, anxiety, or a desire for affirmation remain hidden beneath the surface, they can emerge disguised as cravings or impulses aimed at relieving inner tension. The more unaware a person is of these underlying emotional currents, the more likely they are to succumb to behaviors that provide temporary release but long-term spiritual depletion. Therefore, self-reflection is a crucial discipline. Carving out time to journal or to sit quietly in contemplative thought allows one to observe patterns and triggers. Questions like, "What am I truly feeling right now?" Or, "Is this sexual desire genuine or an escape from an uncomfortable emotion?" can shed light on hidden motivations. When a surge of temptation arises, pausing to breathe deeply and name the emotion can disrupt the automatic reflex to act on it. This simple practice transforms an unconscious compulsion into a moment of conscious choice, effectively reducing the draining impact of reactive behavior. In addition to self-reflection, healthy emotional expression plays an indispensable role. Bottling up anger, sadness, or longing often leads to displacement into areas where one feels less vulnerable, like sexual pursuit. By developing emotional literacy, learning to communicate fears or frustrations in constructive ways, and seeking counsel when burdens become too heavy, a person prevents the buildup of tension that can later manifest destructively. This approach may involve finding safe spaces, support groups, therapy sessions, or spiritual retreats, where authenticity is encouraged. In doing so, one not only fosters mental well-being but preserves the reservoir of spiritual energy needed for fulfilling a higher mandate. Furthermore, there is a significant connection between creativity and sexual energy. Both are deeply linked to the fundamental human capacity for bringing forth newness, be it through offspring or through innovative ideas, art, and service. Channeling this creative force into projects that reflect love, healing, or inspiration can serve as a sanctified release valve. Writing poetry, composing music, volunteering in community outreach, or any number of passionate pursuits can redirect that intense drive into something beneficial for oneself and others. Instead of allowing the energy to stagnate and seek lower outlets, it is consciously elevated to mirror a divine attribute of the power to create. On a spiritual plane, this realignment of energy is akin to sowing seeds in fertile ground rather than letting them scatter aimlessly. It acknowledges that every dimension of human existence, from emotion to desire to intellect, can be harmonized to serve a divine mission. When each facet is given a purposeful channel, the sense of depletion that arises from misused sexual energy diminishes, replaced by a renewed sense of integration and inner peace. A useful practice for maintaining composure and discipline when faced with temptations or restless energy is a focused breathing exercise that stills both the mind and body. One method involves sitting comfortably, ensuring the spine is upright yet relaxed. Inhale gently through the nose for a slow count of 4, imagining that you are drawing in divine light or positive energy that fills your entire being. Then, hold that breath for a count of 4, allowing this healing presence to permeate every cell. Next, exhale through the mouth for a count of 4, envisioning any tension, negativity, or unhelpful urges being released in a calm, steady stream. Finally, remain with empty lungs for a count of 4, pausing in a state of quiet receptivity. Repeating this cycle multiple times can have a profound calming effect, slowing the heart rate and quieting mental chatter. If intrusive images or urges arise, simply acknowledge them without judgment and then gently redirect your attention back to the rhythm of your breath. This approach does not attempt to suppress desire by brute force. Rather, it allows the natural energies of the body to flow, aligning them with a steady, mindful presence. Practitioners often report that it fosters a heightened sense of connection to the divine, as the act of conscious breathing becomes a metaphor for inhaling divine grace and exhaling all that hinders spiritual clarity. Beyond its immediate soothing impact, this technique can be integrated into a daily routine as part of one's spiritual discipline. Starting or ending the day with a few minutes of focused breathing can reinforce an ongoing sense of vigilance and centeredness. When sudden cravings or troubling thoughts surface during daily activities, even a few rounds of this breathing practice can interrupt the cycle of impulsivity, reminding the individual of their higher purpose. Over time, such a simple tool can become an anchor, a reliable way to return to equilibrium whenever life's storms threaten to destabilize. For someone who identifies strongly with having a divine assignment, the capacity to remain unshaken by fleeting urges is invaluable. Rather than losing precious energy to stress or temptation, the chosen individual can channel it into mindful awareness, thereby sharpening discernment and enabling more consistent alignment with moral and spiritual values. This breathing practice is also adaptable to moments when direct prayer feels challenging. If guilt or emotional turmoil makes it hard to find the right words, focusing on the breath can be a wordless form of prayer, an embodied plea for divine assistance. As the physical body relaxes, the heart often softens, making space for a genuine sense of remorse or a renewed willingness to listen for guidance. It serves as a tangible reminder that the divine is as close as the very air we breathe, ever present and ready to restore our strength when we consciously invite that presence into our lives. A remarkable transformation often unfolds when sexual energy is no longer viewed as a troubling force needing constant suppression, but instead embraced as a sacred resource given for a purposeful existence. For those with a keen sense of calling, the harnessing of this energy can lead to heightened intuition, deeper empathy, and a more profound capacity for love that extends beyond mere physical attraction. They start to realize that what once threatened to derail them can now act as fuel for their mission, much like fire, which can either destroy or illuminate, depending on how it is contained and directed. Such a shift in perspective typically begins with a conscious decision to see beyond the surface of pleasure or attraction. Instead of perceiving others merely as potential sources of gratification, the spiritually aware individual sees fellow beings fashioned with inherent dignity and worth. This revelation can dissolve patterns of objectification, replacing them with genuine compassion and understanding. In turn, relationships become richer, anchored in meaningful dialogue and shared values rather than fleeting infatuations or superficial charm. For some, this new viewpoint imparts clarity about their vocation. Sexual energy, once feared or mismanaged, becomes an emblem of creative power that aligns seamlessly with their tasks, whether that involves forming deeper connections with those in need, composing art that uplifts weary souls, or innovating solutions for communal problems. Recognizing that this creative force originates from a divine source reframes every aspect of life, instilling reverence for the body, gratitude for human connection, and a burning desire to steward that energy with integrity. In addition, this transformation affects the way one perceives moral teachings. Instead of bristling at what might initially appear as restrictive rules, the chosen individual gains insight into how these guidelines serve as protective boundaries, ensuring that the potent force of sexuality remains a channel for sanctification rather than destruction. As scripture and spiritual instruction take on a new significance, read not merely as directives but as maps to a life of wholeness, harmony, and impactful service. Community also benefits from the individual who experiences this renewal. Bonds of mentorship grow stronger as the renewed person often shares hard-earned lessons with others on a similar path. Testimonies of overcoming habits that once seemed insurmountable inspire hope, showing that transformation is indeed possible. Service projects flourish under the leadership of those who are no longer divided within themselves, for their inner unity fosters a sense of authenticity that resonates with others. This deeper mastery of sexual energy paves the way for a more mature spirituality, one where devotion is fused with practical wisdom. Choices about how to dress, speak, and interact with potential partners begin to reflect an integrated vision of self, a life that is consistent with the calling to reflect the divine in both mundane and exalted moments. Ultimately, this state of alignment offers freedom from the gnawing sense of hypocrisy, the constant anxiety of hidden failings, and the ever-present worry that one might be squandering their true gifts. Reaching the culmination of this journey requires continual vigilance, humility, and openness to ongoing growth. No matter how far someone has progressed in restoring and protecting their energy, complacency can be a subtle adversary. It whispers that discipline is no longer needed, that one's moral foundations are unshakable. Yet, in moments of pride or neglect, even the most seasoned individual can stumble and leak the very vitality they have fought so diligently to preserve. Thus, a stable spiritual life is characterized by perpetual learning, consistent self-reflection, and an unceasing reliance on divine assistance. For those who have undergone the refining fires of reclaiming misdirected energy, there often emerges a heightened sense of compassion for others. No longer bound by judgment or condemnation, they remember the raw vulnerability that accompanies the struggle between desire and duty. This empathy can manifest as mentorship, guiding others through the labyrinth of conflicting impulses and offering a beacon of hope. Instead of exalting themselves as paragons of virtue, they share their stories of near collapse and recovery, demonstrating how the divine can heal even the deepest wounds. Looking back, what once seemed like insurmountable obstacles may now appear as stepping stones toward greater self-awareness and closeness with the Creator. Each trial, each moral setback, and each victory adds texture to the tapestry of a chosen life. The lessons gleaned from misused sexual energy about the power of humility, the necessity of boundaries, and the grandeur of redemption become cornerstones for future endeavors. Faith matures from a theoretical concept into a lived reality, one that can effectively tackle real-world challenges. Although the path is steep, marked by risks that could easily derail one's progress, it also offers immense rewards. In reclaiming and channeling sexual energy appropriately, the individual grows in inner fortitude, clarity, and authentic love. Creative output flourishes, prayer life deepens, and relationships become platforms for genuine mutual edification rather than mere physical gratification. In the grand scheme, such a life stands as a testament to the power of grace to transmute destructive impulses into vehicles for spiritual illumination. As these principles continue to shape daily conduct, the chosen individual discovers that they do not walk alone. There are countless others striving for the same transformation, building communities that reinforce high standards while extending mercy to those who falter. In unity, they share resources, encouragement, and hope, reminding one another that every moment offers a fresh start. And while the challenges never fully disappear, they lose their tyranny when faced with unwavering resolve and divine support. Ultimately, the journey, fraught with difficulties and marked by peaks and valleys, leads the dedicated soul to a place of deeper wholeness, where spiritual energy flows unobstructed and the calling once sensed in the heart can unfold in all its intended splendor.